character rig, progression, explanation, I don't know. So this was the original proxy rig. This was designed to, which for whatever reason the arms aren't skinned on this version, but it's just rigid skinning with like a kind of squash and stretchy body for just basic posing in the previs of the animation. I think I've got some early starts on. Yeah, and this also has the version of the body that I was going to kind of use as proportions in the early stages. And then moving from that, we have this version, which is essentially an upgraded version of the previous proxy rig. It has various different controllers, and the bones are kind of in the location which the characters are going to be in. The character model is going to follow, so the proportions that are kind of finalized. So just skinning the character over will allow us to keep the same rig and the same animation through to a new model. There's some neck control, head, IK/FK switch, just depending on what the character's doing. There's a pull to constrain on the arm. Feet, regular IK feet. No, we've got IK/FK switching here because it's just kind of mostly unnecessary in feet unless you specifically have that kind of motion, in which case we don't. It's kind of like a main hip controller for the upper body, but then it's nice to have this for just extra little motions inside. I think that's the main kind of aspects of the rig. It's pretty simple. I tried to get some twisting in the forearms, but it was kind of silly because I didn't really need it because he's wearing sleeves that don't twist with the arm. It's kind of stupid. And then kind of after this version, we lead into this one. I don't think this is skinned. Oh, it is skinned. That is nice to know. So in the outliner here, I should be able to bring into... So to get... Yeah, so I used a very basic mesh, such as this, which I then took into ZBrush to generate a high poly mesh, which is... This is not the most high poly version of it, but it's more high poly, and it's just kind of sculpted in the robes and the wrinkles and just kind of got like a nicer shape. Some retopology. So that allowed me to kind of get just a little bit of a nicer shape, and then retopologized over the top of that to get just a nicer shape in kind of sleeves and robes. It also allowed me to bake in a normal map. I kind of wish I did a displacement, but at the time I wasn't really aware of how to do displacements, so I didn't get around to doing that. Rig, exactly the same, works the same way. Animation carries over, nobody had any real trouble with that. Head control, don't really have any eyes yet, eyes are going yet, so it's just the head. The head's is quite gruesome and lumpy in this current state, which is why I wanted to bring this one up. No, wait, no, that's not the old head. Where is the... Okay, never mind, that's... It is... Wait, is it the lumpy head? I think I've done some minor changes to this, but this looks like the old version of the head. It definitely is. I added some teeth in there just to kind of make sense. There are some... I do have... Oh, another thing I forgot to mention in the previous one. I did add a proxy switch. So this will just switch between the two versions of the rig, so you can move this around wherever, and then when you swap, it'll kind of swap between the two rigs. There was some skinning problems between the two rigs. Those have been fixed though. But yeah, that just allowed, when doing the transferring the proxy animation from the early proxy rig to the new proxy rig, you could kind of switch between the two and then line up the new rig to the old kind of animation if you wanted to kind of keep it in line with what that was originally. Overall, like, the rig's kind of working fine here, and it worked pretty well for that. I've got some old versions of the face that I was trying to model. Yeah, so like early version of the face that I was trying to model was just like, I don't know, I tried to box model the face and then work on the topology. It just wasn't working, so I then kind of face modeled and kind of just started with the eye loops and so on and so forth. Which I then took the face here into ZBrush to kind of get a much cleaner version of the face, which you'll see on this kind of final version here. I just hide my look down. So, updates from the previous one. The face rig's been improved, and I was a bit of an idiot and I completely forgotten to put the ears on before I started all of the skinning and weighting and stuff like that, so future reference, make sure to put the ears on the characters. I don't know how I missed over those, it's just, I did. I made sure that the ears topology did match the faces topology, because I was gonna just kind of cut out a hole in the mesh and then attach the ear to the mesh, so the topology does line up between the ear and the face. I just have to redo the skin weights if I wanted to do that, and it's just kind of finding the time to do that, so I skipped out on that. I added the hair. The hair I created a base mesh based on the head, and I took that into ZBrush and I sculpted the hair in. So originally I did the hair with the normal map, but I then learned more about displacement, so the hair has a displacement map, which I did want to then put on the body, but never got around to. Textures have been added. Displacement is kind of visible somewhat in the viewport. All the other controls are the same. The main updates here being the facial controls, the jaw control with some like kind of squash and stretch, just a little bit in the jaw, so that gives you the bit like just. I've limited the rotation information just so you can't pull them too far out, but you can get just a little bit of like movement in the jaw that's fairly natural. On here we've got just for the smiling and like up and down, it's just kind of just a Y value change, driving the blend shapes, left and right blend shapes respectively, and having them independent means you can get some like kind of interesting, more interesting poses than twinning poses with just having one controller, which is nice. There's definitely some poses that are difficult to get, if not impossible, but for considering the character doesn't talk, we don't need too much there. Just some eyebrow blend shapes driven the same way as the cheeks, well, the smile there. So just the Y value up and down, and then just mirrored blend shapes both sides here. So you can get a wide range of poses in the eyebrows, which is quite nice. On top of that, we've got the eye controls, which I added like fleshy eyes, just so the eyes get just a little bit more movement in them, which just looks nice. And it's kind of something you feel more than you see when it comes to the animation. You got some eyelids open and close controls here, so you can do the lower lids separately from the upper lids. You do run into some trouble if you close the eyes and then move around this. So, like, this isn't too bad, but if you then kind of drag it too far off, you get some really weird deformation in there. So you've got to be careful about where you put your eyes. when they're closed, when they're open, and such. So it's a blessing and a curse, the fleshy eyes. I think that's just generally everything on the rig. Oh, you've got the hands. I guess the hands are important. So, the hands are just controlled with these things here. I didn't worry too much about constraining these, because I thought that people would kind of try and at least go for natural hand poses, and it wouldn't be too bad if they kind of pulled them too far out, but it's nice to kind of keep them generally good. All of those zero out quite nicely, because they've got groups to affect their rotations. I wasn't a huge fan of the way I modeled the hands. They're a little bit too spaced out. They're almost bony, which is not really what I like. If you want to pull the hands in together, like the fingers, so they all kind of, you know, you put your hand together as one single unit, you don't really get like that clumping. You have these gaps, like they're almost too thin. Like the gaps here are just too wide. But that's really the only problem with the hands, but they work for the animation, I think. Yeah, I think that's everything on the rig. The character's kind of undergone like a bunch of different changes as it's gone through, but a lot of the main ones aren't really that bad. Let's look at kind of like the skeleton that we've got here. A bunch of different nested controls for the eyes, eyelids, reverse footlock. Oh, and here's all the blend shapes. So I've got... So these are all the eyebrow blend shapes, a Naked Slayer for the mouth blend shapes. This was an attempt at an ooh shape, requested by Jordan, because he wanted to do some ooh shapes in the animation, but I was finding that with the time constraint that we had, the pose was just too niche for the animation, and considering Jordan was the only one who wanted it, I cut that out, just given the fact that it wasn't going quite as smoothly as I'd like. These ones are for the jaws, so this one kind of squashes the jaw as his mouth comes up, and this one stretches it just a little bit when it comes down. The stretch kind of makes him look a little bit slim and bony, so there's definitely something going on there that needs to be looked at, but for the most part with the jaw it kind of works fairly well. And that's everything.